Hi, this is Brent, the climate guru. Will Donald Trump be successful in rolling back the U.S. landmark environmental legislation passed by the Biden administration, the largest in history? Or will the strong momentum in the United States towards renewable energy, including billions of dollars already being spent to build green factories all over the country, simply be unstoppable? Will states like California, a leader in environmental laws and programs that are making a transition away from gas-burning cars to renewable electricity generation, be able to mount successful legal challenges to Trump's assault on environmental protections, as it successfully did, and California did, in the first Trump administration? That's what we're going to look at today. Donald Trump promises to undo all the progress that's been made to remove federal and state environmental laws and sharply increase production of oil and gas just at the wrong time when we are transitioning away from fossil fuels. Trump wants to rip up the landmark Biden environmental legislation, the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, $370 billion allocated in 2022 by U.S. Congress, the largest environmental law in history to move the U.S. towards a renewable economy, which is working. Hundreds of billions have been allocated and are working to build that new economy and employ hundreds of thousands of people. Trump wants to open more federal land and offshore sites to oil and gas drilling, including the pristine National Arctic Wildlife Refuge in northern Alaska. He wants to pause Biden's restriction on natural gas export terminals. If that happens, it would hinder the transition to renewables in many Asian developing countries. Trump said he wants to reverse the 2009 EPA finding that carbon emissions are harmful. Project 2025, we know, the blueprint for Trump's plan when he takes office. He promised to undo all the laws that are moving us towards reduced greenhouse gas emissions to avoid the dangers of global warming. Trump would rescind all climate policies from its foreign aid programs, and he says he wants to cease the war on fossil fuels in the developing world. Will the measures being taken by the outgoing Biden administration to legally block the assault by Trump on environmental laws be successful? Biden has been pushing out the last dollars approved in the $370 billion IRA. Most of it's been spent, and the last dollars are now being pushed out to fund green energy projects. This money cannot be taken back. These factories are under construction, being built, employing over 300,000 new people, new jobs. We're at a critical juncture in our fight to mitigate climate change, and we must continue in that direction. 2023 was the hottest year of the Earth's climate, and 2024 will break that record. The world's nations have come together in the annual UN climate conferences since the 1980s to make commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to slow global warming. Much progress has been made. Emissions have been reduced in the EU and the US and in England. We're making a transition to renewable energy sources. Most coal electric generating plants that the United States relied on for 100 years to generate electricity, most of them have been closed. It's the dirtiest fossil fuel. They've transitioned to natural gas, which is a fossil fuel but burns half the amount of carbon when burned. The EPA recently approved a plan to reduce nitrous oxide, another important fossil fuel gas from heavy trucks, the main cause of smog. Looking internationally, China, which is the largest emitter of fossil fuels in the world, 34% of the world's total, they've announced that their emissions may have peaked and now could start to see a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions as it transitions to renewables. China makes more solar energy panels than the whole world combined, and is using huge amounts to create the world's largest solar generating facilities. They're using themselves, including export. The cost of renewable electricity generation and wind are much cheaper than they have ever been compared to fossil fuels, natural gas, and coal. The growth of renewables is growing exponentially. In the last 10 years, solar has increased 25% per year. in the amount of solar electric generating plants. The cost is down 40%. Economic forces of the marketplace are rapidly moving away from fossil fuels to solar and wind generation. Globally, 28% of electric generations come from renewables, including hydroelectric, wind, and solar. In the United States, 21% of our electric comes from renewables, hydro, wind, and solar. The United States Energy Information Agency predicts that by year 2050, renewables will supply 44% of the U.S. electric generation, driven mainly by wind and solar. That's the direction we're moving in, many of it because of market forces. The world's nations and private industry are not moving nearly as quickly as we need to avoid the worst climate change outcomes. We need to continue to move more in that direction and even more quickly. At this critical time, U.S. leadership is needed on the international stage to continue to advance the world's transitions to renewable and continue the Biden landmark environmental legislation domestically and internationally. Climate scientists warn us that to meet the goals necessary to avoid the worst outcomes of global warming, two-thirds of all fossil fuels must remain in the ground. And the only way we can do that is transitioning to green electric generation and transportation. We're now building each day enough electric generating plants from wind and solar equivalent to a nuclear power plant each day. And much of this is in the Midwest, where there's plenty of sun and also where there's plenty of wind that blows all year round. And a lot of this is in Republican states. Since 2010, industrial scale solar costs have dropped precipitously. For American industry to move back to the U.S. to avoid the globalization and deindustrialization that began in the 1980s when huge factories closed all over the country, especially in the Midwest, in our huge industrial belt turned into the Rust Belt, to get these companies to move back to the United States, it's essential that we continue expenditures, grants, and tax credits of the IRA. It will continue to spur the huge development of domestic manufacturing that we're seeing now. John Podesta, the U.S. climate envoy, told the world of nations at the last UN climate conference that Trump's plan to stop the U.S. move towards renewables will not be successful. He says the amount already expended, billions in grants and tax credits, is already in place. It cannot be stopped. He says we will continue to drive investments in wind and solar with the money that's been expended and as the factories and new technology is developed. At the last climate conference of the United Nations, an agreement was reached on ground rules for setting markets for international carbon credits to trade credits to meet climate goals. This is very, very important on the world stage. John Podesta said, "The climate change fight is bigger than one election or one political cycle." We do expect Trump to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accords, as he did his first year in office, but it will only be temporary, as Trump did in his first administration. As soon as Biden was elected, he rejoined the Paris Climate Accords. In March of 2024, the EPA finalized federal rules to cut vehicle emissions by 49% by 2032. The EPA predicts that up to 56% of vehicles sold after 2030 will be electric. As we transition away from coal for our electric generation towards natural gas and renewables, and we need to move away from natural gas eventually, the biggest cause of fossil fuel emissions in the United States today is transportation. It formerly was equal to electric production, but transportation is now the biggest. California has worked also to make its climate laws Trump-proof. And Governor Gavin Newsom called a special session of the legislature to accomplish just that. As we know, decades ago, the EPA gave California a waiver that allows it to enact its own pollution controls that are stricter than federal regulations in terms of mileage requirements and other states can adopt California rules as their own. More than a dozen states and also D.C. follow California car emission legislations. Remember, California is a huge economy. If it was a separate country in the world, it would be the 5th largest economy in the world. And it has market muscle to make manufacturers, autos, conform to California regulations. It set the pace for the United States in much of the world in terms of vehicle emission standards. Because of its huge impact with the state of California, 12 other states, and D.C. following the California rules, the California vehicle emissions rules apply to 40% of the U.S. auto market. It's huge. And what we know is that auto manufacturers don't want several different standards for auto manufacturing emissions in the United States. They want one standard to follow it. And many of them have followed the California standard because they know that's where the future is. California just got authority from Biden to ban the sale in California of all gas-powered cars by the year 2035. No gas-powered cars, new sales by 2035 in California. And 3/4 of new trucks sold in California by 2035 must be zero emissions. It will be very difficult for Trump to undo those approvals. The impact California has is shown that the EU and China have already adopted parts of California's strict tailpipe emissions. 16 states have promised to follow the California car rule, and 10 promised to follow the California truck rule. That's a huge amount of the U.S. auto market. And that's why so many auto manufacturers support one standard, and they're willing to follow the California standard. Dan Becker from the Center for Biological Diversity said locking in strong clean car rules should survive whatever the next administration throws at it. California Governor Newsom said clean cars are here to stay. And that is so true based on market realities. California approved the 2022 California Climate Commitment, $44 billion spending package, including water projects, wildfire, and extreme heat protection. California recently passed the first law in the United States to require major companies who do business in California to disclose its greenhouse gas emissions. California also allows local government and cities to shut down oil and gas projects in their communities. Trump's threatened to revoke California's waiver that allows it to impose its own mileage efficiency laws and says California Governor Gavin Newsom is an environmental maniac who's crushing our auto manufacturers, even though most auto manufacturers support California's rules. Newsom called a special session of the California legislature to make environmental laws Trump-proof. Now, one of the important things that California is doing is moving forward with lawsuits against certain industries in the U.S., especially oil, electric generation, that do business in California. And then California enters legal settlements, out-of-court settlements with these companies that the United States government cannot undermine. California's environmental policies have set the pace for the nation's and the whole world's environmental programs. The first Trump administration lost 83% of its lawsuits against the state of California in its efforts to roll back environmental regulations. They were very unsuccessful. We expect that will happen the second term. The Center for Biological Diversity, along with Earth Justice in the United States, filed 266 lawsuits against the first Trump administration and won 90%. Some of the lawsuits that they won are protecting endangered species, including whales, grizzly bears, protect national forests, preventing coal mining in U.S. public lands, preventing oil and gas drilling in environmental sensitive areas of Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, preventing the import of hunting trophies from Africa, such as mounted leopards. The National Resource Defense Council, a very important advocacy group, filed more than 100 lawsuits against the first Trump administration during the first 1,000 days of the administration, preventing harmful chemicals into the environment ocean conservation, protecting endangered species, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by the enforcement of stricter emission standards. The Environmental Resource Defense Council won 92% of its lawsuits. NRDC said no administration is above the law, and the NRDC will continue to prove that. The Biden Inflation Reduction Act is moving forward, and Trump will not have, it's predicted, the support in Congress to revoke that law. First of all, he needs 60 votes to overcome a filibuster. He doesn't have that many Republican representatives. He has a slight majority. Doesn't have 60 Republicans in the Senate. And most of the money allocated to the IRA program has already been spent on projects all over the country and cannot be taken back. One of the important things is that Republicans are very supportive in these states of the IRA. They see tens of thousands of new jobs, huge investments in their states, many of them in the Midwest and the Southeast and southern states, and they are telling Trump, do not mess with the IRA. We need that. The IRA has been a huge success, and it's predicted that it'll reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 21 gigatons. 21 gigatons, to give an idea what that is, we emit 6 gigatons a year in the United States, and the world emits about 50 gigatons globally, the whole world. So it will reduce 21 gigatons by the year 2050, equivalent of all cars in the United States taken off the road for 15 years. So the IRA is predicted to be very successful in reducing carbon emissions. The IRA has created 330,000 jobs in clean energy and energy efficiency in nearly all 50 states. Private corporations announced $265 billion in green energy investments in nearly every state. So more than 90% of the IRA money has been allocated. Biden's pushing the last amount out the door before Trump takes office, and the U.S. government cannot take them back. A lot of this money has flowed into lower-income communities and in places where unemployment and new jobs are needed. To give an idea, new clean energy manufacturing plants, storage batteries plants, wind turbines, solar panel manufacturing will triple U.S. solar power. To give an idea of the states, Georgia had $18 billion so far from the IRA incentives in electric vehicle manufacturing plants, solar energy plants. South Carolina, $10 billion, big battery storage plants. Michigan, $8 billion. Arizona, $7 billion, solar electric generating plants. Ohio, $6.4 billion. Nevada, $4 billion. Texas, $2.4 billion. As you can see, most of this money has been spent in Republican districts. And Republican members of Congress have been supportive of the IRA because they see factories built in their states employing tens of thousands of people. And they've written to Trump not to mess with the IRA. 3.4 million homes in the U.S. received $8 billion in tax credits to make their homes more energy efficient from the IRA. 250,000 Americans have claimed tax credits of $7,500 each to buy a new electric car, which has amounted to $1.5 billion. The Congressional Budget Office says that the IRA will cause investments of $783 billion in energy security and reduce climate change. Goldman Sachs, one of the largest investment bankers in the country, has put a value of the IRA incentives at $1.2 trillion by the year 2032. Biden has also authorized conservation easements to preserve land, prairie, grasslands that are threatened with conversion, protect forests, coastal habitat, preserve land that stores large amounts of carbon. So when Trump announced in 2017 that the U.S. would withdraw from the 2015 climate accords, many states, grassroots organizations, local government announced they are going to continue to move our economy towards a new green production system. The group America All In, 4,000 mayors, governors, business leaders, tribal nations step forward to fill the void in the United States and internationally, continue to move the U.S. towards renewables. A 2019 report found that the bottom-up leadership from cities, states, businesses across the country would cut emissions up to 37% by 2030, even without U.S. government intervention. 24 states and territories in the bipartisan U.S. Climate Alliance, representing 54% of the U.S. population, have collectively committed to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Trump's pick of conservative justices are a problem. They continue to challenge long-established environmental laws, and they recently restricted the authority of the EPA to limit air and water pollution. This is a continuing challenge for those that support the fight against climate change. During the first Trump administration, positions in the federal government and the Interior Department were filled with incompetent nominees who took those positions. There were much corruption, resignations. These folks had ties to big oil and coal and gas. And because of their incompetence and unwillingness to follow the rules to undo existing laws, there were many failed attempts. And they lost most of their cases in court, and we can anticipate that, again, Trump will nominate very incompetent, unskilled people during his second term, and there will be many failures again. The reality is that Trump cannot derail the transition to clean energy. Much of the transition to green industry is in Republican states that provided hundreds of thousands of jobs that Trump will not dare to undermine. Gina McCarthy, the former EPA administrator, said, "No matter what Trump may say, the shift to clean energy is unstoppable, and our country is not turning back." Thanks for tuning in to the Climate Guru podcast. Stay inspired, stay informed, and keep taking action for our planet's future. Until next time, and remember, together we can make a difference.